Welcome to Wisdom for Nonprofits, bringing the best business wisdom to the nonprofit world. Proven leaders share their experience, insights, and best practices. Finally, a podcast for the busy nonprofit professional. And now, your trusted advisor, Bettina Meyer-Flug.
Welcome to another episode of Wisdom for Nonprofits. Today we will embark on an insightful journey unraveling the path to implement a successful strategic plan. We will dive into the intricacies of crafting a strategic plan, exploring the session tools and techniques along the way. Additionally, we will touch on a significant of compelling vision narrative and provide guidance on ensuring successful implementation. That's the best part of it, isn't it? Once a strategic plan is in place, we will guide you through effective monitoring techniques to track progress. We will discuss the crucial questions of who should be involved in this process and shed light on incorporating individual goals seamlessly into the strategic planning framework. Stay tuned for a wealth of knowledge and actionable insights to elevate your nonprofit journey. This is Wisdom for Nonprofits. We have here today Jennifer Drago. She's a nonprofit strategist with over 30 years of experience. She served in a corporate strategic and have a lot of award-winning plan, helping organizations implement laser-focused vision and strategy to guide their operations and their growth. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for here being with us today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's my pleasure.
I'm very curious to learn more about your professional path. You started in a corporate environment and now you are one of the best strategic planning consultants that I know there in your area. Can you explain how was this path and what led you to the nonprofit world?
Yes. So I worked in corporate healthcare and senior living organizations for the bulk of my career. I'm in the United States, so I've worked in Arizona predominantly. I also helped to launch 2 nonprofits in my service area that were for related services serving the same population. And my path really started in healthcare. I always wanted to be really a physician, but I ended up going to business school and going the healthcare administration route. And so I got to work in hospitals and health systems, doing not just strategic planning for the organization, but also helping them to talk about their programs and services and where they wanted to take those to serve their mission and serve the community. And so from there, I was a vice president. I got to also work on the operational side, which is great because it's one thing to plan something, but it's another thing then to have to operate it and to operate it successfully. So that's always a great match of skills. And from there, I moved into senior living, lots of similarities to healthcare, and part of senior living is health related for certain. But got to continue to serve the same target audience, which was, I work in an area where there's a lot of retirement communities, so lots of seniors. And so I left the corporate world about 2.5 years ago and started my own consulting firm so that I could continue to help other nonprofits make an impact. And I work with small nonprofits to very large nonprofits. And believe it or not, the issues are very similar between the small and the large nonprofits, but everybody can benefit from having a great strategic plan. So that's why I like to talk about that so much.
And that's the topic of our podcast today. Can you explain then the path to really create an amazing strategic plan?
Yeah. So believe it or not, I learned a new way to strategic plan about 20 years into my career. So when I started to do strategic planning, we would get generally our boards around a table, and we'd start with our mission, and we talk about our mission first, and then we talk about our vision statement, which was generally one sentence. So let me back up to mission. Mission is why the organization exists. So yes, we have to reaffirm that every so often. I don't often start with mission anymore, and I'll tell you why. But then we would go to the vision statement. And a vision statement is generally a one-sentence aspirational statement of a future state that you would like your organization to contribute to. So in the organization, the senior living organization that I most recently worked at, our vision statement was to empower people to enjoy living a longer, healthier, more purposeful life. Okay, that was a great vision statement, but what does it mean? How do you really do that, right? What I learned, again, 20 years into my career, and I learned it from a very smart strategic planning consultant, is that let's get that vision very clear in our sights. Let's understand where we are taking this organization. The CEO or the executive director of a nonprofit, their entire purpose, the reason that we have that position in the organization is to be visionary, is to create the future vision of the company. Where are we taking this organization? The strategic plan tells us how to get there. So now I start with what's called a vision narrative, which is basically articulating what the future vision of the organization looks like. What does this organization look like in 10 years? And we do that by asking ourselves some very specific questions, asking our boards and others, and we can go through some of those questions. But then it becomes, your strategic plan becomes the roadmap to get to that destination.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's unique, I think, but I found it as I now use it with my clients, but I used it, like I said, in the last 10 years of the strategic planning that I did with organizations, and we found it to be a really effective way to do things.
And this is the workbook that you offer for free that we can send a link here on the podcast later on. Is that right?
You bet. I will absolutely give you the link. I have a free, it's a 12-page workbook that you can use with your own organization, or you can sit down with your board and do it. I really recommend that nonprofit leaders go through this process with their board members, because your board's role is to provide strategic oversight for the organization. So they should be part of articulating what that future vision looks like for the organization. And would it be okay if I shared some of the questions that we asked?
Of course, yes.
Okay. So one of the reasons that a vision narrative is so powerful, again, is that you are thinking big picture where I want my organization to be some years in the future. So generally, I like to use 10 years in the future. Now, we don't create a 10-year strategic plan, but we're thinking big in terms of if we were really rocking it, where would we be in 10 years? And so some of the questions that we ask are, how many people are we serving? So today we might be serving 1,000 clients, but in 10 years from now, maybe we want to 10x that or 100x that. Maybe we really want to see this organization be able to grow its support or its funding or its reimbursement to serve even more people in the future. So if we talk about what kind of impact do we want to have in terms of clients and revenues or fundraising and donations, how do we want that to change over the next 10 years? We talk about programs and services, the heart and soul of why nonprofits exist. Maybe today we have a program that, the core to our mission, but we see ourselves expanding and adding an additional program or more than one program to serve other needs that we see that are consistent with our mission. So we would write that into what the future organization looks like. Maybe we want to serve a different geography. Maybe, we started in one city, but we know that neighboring cities and towns have the same needs. So we want to expand into other locations. We talk about in our vision narrative, and the workbook walks you through all these questions. What does your team need to look like? So if we have 10,000 clients 10 years from now, what kind of team are we going to need to have to support those 10,000 clients. So maybe we need to add some key leadership positions. So we actually write that into the goal. What do our operations need to look like? So, maybe if we're providing a product or a service or collecting donated goods, maybe we need bigger warehouses. Or if we're producing something, maybe we need to look at how to produce more of those things to be able to serve the clientele. So you can see how, if you take the time to ask these questions and think about, again, big picture, pie in the sky, you're dreaming, what could our organization look like in 10 years? You create a vision narrative. So it's not a one sentence anymore. It's a couple of paragraphs of descriptive language that portrays what that organization looks like in the future. So you might say, it's 2024. So in 2034, ABC nonprofit will, and then you put some paragraphs with bullets underneath. We will be serving 10,000 clients and providing services that include A, B, and C. We will have donations from our loyal funders of, $3 million and corporate donations of $2 million to support our services. We will be active in 10 locations across 3 counties. We will, and so you can see that when you can describe what that future organization looks like, there's a couple things that happen. One, everybody can rally around it. So your board can get excited, your employees can get excited, any new hires that you bring on, they know exactly where you're headed. When you continue to talk about that every month at your all staff meetings or every month at your board meetings, you're reminding people, and again, it's kind of a storytelling method, but you're reminding people of where you're taking that organization. And then as you craft your strategic plan, things become very clear when you know I'm expanding services or I'm expanding geography. You can pretty much, your strategic plan kind of falls right out of that, your pillars, the areas of focus that you need to focus on. So it's a very powerful thing to create this vision narrative.
And after this step, what's next?
Yeah, great question. So immediately after we craft the vision narrative, when I'm working with a board and an executive director, we start to talk about the strategic pillars or the areas of focus. And generally, there's only 3 to 5 key areas that fall out of that long-term visioning. So the way to think about this, okay, that's my 10-year vision. What do I need to really focus on over the next 2 to 3 years to start moving toward that 10-year vision, that destination? And sometimes it's things like governance. We need more board members. We need different types of board members. We need our board to be more of a governing board than a working board. Governance is a common one that falls out. Lots of times it's HR strategies, human resource strategies. So in order to attract and retain the talent that we need, we're going to have to offer different benefits. We might have to really be very mindful of compensation and make sure that we're always focused on being a market leader. Yeah, things like that. And again, if there's any leadership positions that need to be hired, that might fall out. So that's another pillar area that comes out of these. Obviously operations, because programmatically, again, that's the heart and soul of what nonprofits are. We need to think about, are we expanding this and how, and what resources do we need to bring to bear to have those expansions occur? Almost always, another pillar area is your financial model, your business model. So how am I going to pay for this? Is that more donations? Is there a reimbursement opportunity that we can activate here? So those are some of the strategic areas that fall out. So that's the next stage, is just what are we going to focus on in big rocks, right? And then I gave you some examples. Then we start to dig into each of those areas. So we'll get some agreement among the board. Okay, those are the 4 areas we're going to focus on. Then we'll take them one by one and we'll start to figure out what our goals are for the next year to 2 years, because not everything can be accomplished in a year, especially if we're talking about being a market leader in employee recruitment and retention as an example, right? So we plot out what our goals are going to be, and we make them very specific around having a timeline and as specific a goal as we can, right? So it won't be just decrease employee turnover. It would be, we're going to decrease employee turnover from X to X by this date. And so that's an example of some of the things that we would do to get to the goals. So it goes vision, narrative, strategic pillars or area of focus, and then getting right into the goals, which are 1 to 2 year goals.
Do you work as well doing the KPIs? How are you going to measure those?
Yes. So lots of organizations like to use different terms. There's KPIs or OKRs, which are objectives and key results. KPIs are key performance indicators. Either one of those are fine, and that gets to the specificity of their goals, right? How are we going to measure what we're doing and know that we achieved our goal? That's really the thing behind that. So whatever you choose to use, I support. I know we're going to talk a little bit about monitoring, but when you make things measurable, it's a lot easier to monitor your progress toward getting there.
Mm-hmm. How do we embed the competitive advantages that a nonprofit have into the strategic planning?
That's a great question. Before we even go into a strategic planning process, as a consultant, what I like to do is to do a SWOT analysis. You've probably heard of this. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, an executive director can do this themselves. I often find it instructive to have a third party, a third set of eyes, like a consultant, do it. And the way I like to do it is I talk to every single board member and every single key executive, and I interview them for about 30 minutes. And I learn a lot about the organization. And when I'm one-on-one with people, they tell me things that they might not say in a group setting. So those are some maybe keys or tips in order to that I would use to work on creating a SWOT analysis. And that's going to give you your competitive advantage as well as opportunities that you have to add to that competitive advantage.
Wonderful. And is there any tools that you use during the strategic planning to optimize this process, or only Excel spreadsheets, anything specific that's helpful?
Yeah. Well, I try to use tools that the client is already using, right? And but I'm always so in its simplistic terms, what I do when I'm working with a board and we're doing a lot of brainstorming, I'm using a lot of flip charts to capture ideas and to try to bring about the consensus at some point after we've brainstormed. So I use a lot of flip charts, but then everything I do goes into Word documents and Excel spreadsheets. So it's just that simple. And the Excel spreadsheets are what I use to monitor progress toward our strategic plan through a set of dashboards. And it's a simple Excel spreadsheet.
Perfect. And once you have it, how do you ensure you have a successful implementation of the strategic planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's where lots of strategic plans fail, right? We can write the best plan and put it in a drawer and it's not going to get accomplished, right? So the first thing I would say is I've talked a lot about board involvement, right? It is the purview of your nonprofit board to provide strategic oversight for the organization. So the executive director can't sit in their office by themselves and draft the strategic plan. This is an all-in document where everybody's input is really valuable. And when you do that, everybody's got buy-in and they all have skin in the game so that they can be a part of the success. So that's kind of step one, is make sure that you have the right people around the table formulating the strategic plan. The second thing that I would say is that your strategic plan has to have visibility. And I'm going to back that up to that vision narrative. Your vision narrative should be something that, as an executive, the executive director should be talking about all the time. They should be reciting it until they feel nauseous reciting it, because you've heard the old adage, people need to hear things 7 times for them to sink in, right? Well, in today's world of all the media coming at us and social media and our phones always dinging and things like that, it's far more than 7 times. So if you really want everybody in your organization, all your team members, your leadership members, your board members rowing in the same direction, you need, as the executive director or CEO, to be speaking about this all the time. And so I would start with the vision narrative, but then I would follow that up with reiterating what your strategic goals are for that specific quarter, and be talking about those as often as weekly. So that's the second thing, is the visibility, and that's going to primarily come from your CEO. And the third thing that I would say in terms of successful implementation is, you've heard the adage, what gets measured gets done, right? Or what gets measured matters. When we step on the scale each day or once a week, we are way more motivated with how we exercise and what we put in our mouth. There's just, and it's the same thing with your strategic goals. So if you have a dashboard or a table, an Excel sheet that has your goals in it, or your KPIs, or however it is you like to monitor, that should be very visible. It should go to your leadership team weekly. It should go to your board every time they meet, generally monthly or bi-monthly. And that is going to help everyone know where we are in implementing our strategic plan.
You mentioned about quarterly goals. So how do you go to the overall strategic planning goals that's normally done for a year, breaking down to quarterly? And you mentioned as well some goals that are for the future for 2 and 3 years. How do you separate this in the strategic planning?
Sure, it's great question. So remember I said we start with the strategic pillars or the focus areas. That's generally 3 to 5 things that you're going to work on. So I group all the goals. So say we had some goals related to governance and board development. I would put all the goals for the coming year to year and a half, or year to 2 years. Again, generally they're annual goals, but recognizing not everything can happen in a year. I would put those under that heading. And what I would do in terms of quarterly, so on my dashboard, I know that goal 1A, if it's a governance related goal, maybe it's create a succession plan for your chief executive. I would put the quarter that's due, right? Because everything's going to have a timeline associated with it. So that's Q1. The next goal might be something that is going to wait till Q3. So in that dashboard, again, all in one page in a glance, I can see when something is due. And then I also have a stoplight diagram right next to the dates that things are due and the quarters in which they fall. And we use the indicators just like a traffic light in the US, red, yellow, green. So something's on track and going well, it's green. Something's yellow, we're hitting a little bit of a barrier or we're delayed. Something's red, we're at risk for not meeting that objective. And that's all in one page called a dashboard, or I call it a dashboard.
Perfect. And who should be involved in all this process? You mentioned a lot about the board members, but also that you interview each key person in the nonprofit. If you're talking with a small nonprofit, a medium, and a big nonprofit, it probably varies. But if you can give us a hint who should be involved, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So in creating the strategic plan, Generally, it's the board and key leadership members that are creating the strategic plan, formulating that. When it comes to monitoring the strategic plan, the ones that have the ultimate responsibility for that, obviously, are the CEO and the board. They're going to be, they're going to hold each other accountable for those things. And then the CEO is going to hold their leadership team accountable for goals that fall within their functional area. So we have a cascade effect here. So once we do our strategic goals, right, some of those goals are going to fall to the individual leadership team members. And then some of those goals are going to trickle down to right down to your frontline staff. And that's actually a best practice, is when you can have all the levels in your organization to have some skin in the game about the organization's strategic goals. So maybe as part of their performance reviews, they are also measured on things that impact the strategic goals of the organization. So in essence, if you do that, everybody, you said who should be involved? Everybody's involved in some way. And again, that's a best practice.
I loved all the tips so far. I'm taking notes here, enjoying a lot. And how do we incorporate their own goals into the strategic planning? Imagine that you have a lot of direct reports who are strategic leaders in your organization, and they have their own goals: growing professionally, changing areas, moving from operations to fundraising. How do we incorporate their own goals into this strategic planning? Use this 30-minute interview, or is there any other process that you can bring to the table?
Well, certainly when you're interviewing key people, and when you're starting your strategic planning process, that's a great time to get everybody's input into what are the organization's opportunities, i.e., where should we be going, right? When you get down to setting goals for the year on an individual basis, one of the things we used to do in the organization that I worked in is every employee had, as part of their own goals, the budgetary goal of the organization. So, for example, in everyone's goal, it was, this department. So if I worked in the dietary department of a senior living facility, it would say the dietary department meets or exceeds its quarterly budget goals. And you might say, okay, but can every employee help with that? Yes. I mean, we all use supplies, right? We all are great ambassadors of our resources, or stewards of our resources, or not. So we would take some of the bigger organizational goals and bring them down again to the individual level where it made sense, and generally just one or two goals. But then we would also allow the employee and the manager to talk about those personal goals too. So Jennifer Drago, the dishwasher, might have a budgetary goal that relates to the dietary department that I share with all my colleagues in the dietary department. But if my goal personally is to go to nursing school, then I can list that, and my team member might be able to support me in doing that through flexible scheduling and things like that, right? So it's a combination of organizational goals and personal goals. And I really believe that is important for all of our team members.
Thank you. I think it was incredible, everything that you shared, and I'm excited on seeing this vision narrative workbook that you're going to share with all of us. This will be on the description of our podcast. And thank you for joining us in this enlightening episode of Wisdom for Nonprofits. We hope you gain valuable insights in the path of a successful nonprofit professional and the intrinsicity of strategic planning. To further enhance your nonprofit journey, be sure to download Jennifer Drago's exclusive workbook that will help you create this vision narrative for your strategic planning. And if you also want someone supporting your executives inside a nonprofit, you can count on me as a coach and as your reliable accounting partner. Thank you so much, and hope to talk to you soon in the next episode of Wisdom for Nonprofits.
listening to Wisdom for Nonprofits. To hear past and future episodes, please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast channel. We appreciate your reviews and suggestions for future show topics. If you have a question or a suggestion, please write to us at podcast@wity.tech. More resources are available for you at our website, wity.tech. And please join us in the Wisdom for Nonprofits group on LinkedIn. Wisdom for Nonprofits is copyright 2019 by Bettina Meyer-Flug and wity.tech. All rights reserved.